Here on Elemental, we answer a lot of interesting questions, but recently, while making a video on how to remove bloatware from MIUI 12, we came across a question that's been haunting us for quite a while now. I mean, if companies know that adding bloatware and ads, third-party ads on their smartphones, annoys customers, then why do they do it in the first place? Interesting question. Let's find out. Hey guys, my name is Shubham. You are watching Elemental, where we talk about the smaller things in tech that make a much bigger impact on the real world. You can catch us every Sunday at 1 PM, and if you love this series, do not forget to subscribe and also hit that bell icon for the latest notifications. Now, before we get started with the explanation, let me tell you that we have done a lot of guides on how to remove bloatware from your smartphone, not just in the form of videos, but also written articles. So you can just check them out once you're done with this video if you want to take any kind of action down in the description, because yes, that's there to help you out. See how much we guys love you. Now it's your time to reciprocate by hitting that like button, because that helps us massively. Okay, so the bloat in bloatware refers to something being swollen, and ware refers to software. So technically it is software that makes your smartphone swollen. Okay, so in this context, bloat refers to a piece of pre-installed software that ends up taking your smartphone's resources like storage and RAM. Now, we are living in much better times, because back in 2013, when the Galaxy S4 was launched, it had so much bloatware that it comprised 7 gigs of the smartphone's total 16 gigabytes of internal storage. This comprised Samsung's own suite of apps and some extra apps like Flipboard, AllShare, and even some widgets like those of Yahoo Stocks. And even to date, you have Samsung's characteristic problem of providing you with 2 apps that are of the same kind. And it's not just Samsung, you also have brands like Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo, Realme, Huawei, who all have their own app stores. Like, why? Why do they even need it when you already have Google Play, which offers apps that are much more refined than what you would find on these third-party stores? Well, one of the reasons for this is that all the brands that I just mentioned are Chinese, except Samsung. And as you may know, there is no Google in China. Android, on the other hand, is owned by Google, but it is an open source platform, which means anyone can modify its source code and put their own programs and apps into the kernel. This means that any company in China, be it Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, Realme, Huawei, and even OnePlus, can remove all references to Google from the source code, replace them with their own references, and just call it their own operating system. That's why you have names like ColorOS, and my personal name for any operating system, Fun Touch OS. And this is proven to be very successful for these companies, because they have ended up amassing users to the tune of 9-digit figures in 100 millions. And since they have done so much work in including their own apps and their own app stores, their own references, that they find it easy to just sprinkle some Google suite of apps and Google Play instead of removing their own app stores. But why does Samsung do it? Well, there are a lot of reasons to this. The first and the foremost reason is that a lot of popular Korean apps were only found on the Samsung Galaxy Store, at least until now, and not on Google Play. This meant that whenever a person wanted to use any kind of instant messenger, they had to resort to the Galaxy Store. And I mean, recently, yes, a lot of apps have come down to Google Play, but it was the case back then. Also, the second thing is that Samsung also incentivizes its users to use its app store, its Galaxy Store. In 2018, it was found that Samsung was rewarding its users whenever they downloaded an app from the Galaxy Store. The third thing is that Samsung makes sure that some key apps can only be updated from the Galaxy Store. So Samsung Pay is a very popular app in South Korea, and it can only be updated via Samsung's Galaxy Store. Then there's also a factor of chance. Bloatware is nothing new on phones. We have seen Nokia phones from the 2000s come with bloatware pre-installed. Yes, the games that you played back in the day, like those 3 games that were like free for the first 3 runs, and then they would ask you to like download them by paying $50 or $100, whatever, that's a form of bloatware. Another example is antiviruses. Yes, a lot of smartphones And yeah, PCs and laptops come pre-installed with antiviruses that have free trials of 3 or 6 months. And once that time has elapsed, well, it's time to pay up. And a lot of people are actually cornered into buying that antivirus because they don't know that there are other free alternatives on the internet. And this brings us to the biggest incentive of including bloatware despite customers' serious white burning hate towards it: money. App developers can pay manufacturers to have their products on a list of apps that come pre-installed when users activate a new phone. Developers can also pay to send post-installation alerts, notifications, and reminders to promote apps over the life of the phone. And this means a lot if you are selling budget phones in a large volume. And that's why manufacturers like to call this segment the volume segment. You see, when you try to include bloatware on a premium smartphone, it is not a very ideal situation because first of all, the incentives that you get from these developers that want to include bloatware on your smartphone are very tiny, and premium phones don't sell all that much. So at the end of it, you end up losing A, your credibility, and B, it doesn't really make much sense because you're not making a lot of profit because these smartphones don't sell a lot. But on the contrary, if you are trying to include bloatware on a smartphone that is already cheap and it sells like hotcakes, then you can just reduce the price of that budget smartphone just a little bit, include the bloatware, and then the customer is going to think that, yeah, this smartphone is pretty cheap, but then at the end of it, you are making up for that deficit by including bloatware. Now comes the dark side of bloatware: data collection. A lot of pre-installed apps cannot be uninstalled in the first place, and if they can be uninstalled, they leave behind certain services that are still running in the background. Facebook is a prime example of this. Some people tried installing the pre-installed version of Facebook in certain smartphones and they found out that 2 of its services, Facebook App Installer and Facebook App Manager, were still running in the background collecting tiny amounts of data. Now, OnePlus actually got rid of Facebook's pre-installed app after coming under fire from some of its users from its community, and OnePlus later on justified the use of these Facebook services as being a feature that aids battery efficiency. But think about it, does it make sense? Now, while these were the biggest reasons to include bloatware, you as a customer, as a user, must also know what exactly classifies as bloatware, what's not bloatware, and more importantly, how you can remove bloatware from your smartphone. The distinction between what's bloatware and what's not is a very thin line, and it becomes blurry very quickly. You must have heard the phrase, "one man's junk is another man's gold." It applies over here very well because some people may find that one app is not useful to them, while others may think that that app has a lot of functionality, that app has a lot of value to them. So let's take the example of Samsung's DeX. A lot of people think that they don't use that app all that often, so it just sits around lying dormant, doing nothing, just taking up space on their smartphones. Whereas while I was checking out the Galaxy Z Fold 2, I found Samsung DeX to be pretty interesting because it let me mirror my screen on the smartphone using Google's Drive right on my TV. So it was very useful for me at the time, but it wasn't useful for that other person. Also, take GarageBand for example, right? It comes with iOS devices and Macs, right? And a lot of people think that, yeah, I don't use this app all that much. I don't even make music. And why do I need a digital audio workstation? Whereas I use it, I enjoy it as like a time pass. Like I like making songs on that. So there's a very thin line when it comes over here. But more importantly, you are the person who gets to decide what's bloatware and what's not by just running 2 litmus tests on it. One is that app useful to you? And second, is it collecting unnecessary data from you? Because at the end of the day, you are the person who's using your smartphone and no one else. You get to take your decisions. Now, as I said in the beginning of this video, we have done a bunch of guides that tell you how to remove bloatware from your smartphone. And if you think that now is the time to remove bloatware, to remove the stuff that you don't want on your smartphone, it's a very good time because the links are waiting for you right there in the description. Go check them out. And that brings us to the end of this very interesting episode of Elemental. I really hope I helped you out in some way or the other. And if I did, do come down in the comments, tell me about it, like that video as well, share it with your friends, and also remember, new Elemental videos come out every Sunday at 1 p.m. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and also that there are a lot of further reading links in the description along with guides and all of that. So I highly recommend you to go check that out as well. And for all things tech, log on to gadgets360.com.